Well, hello and welcome to the e-commerce podcast with me, your host, Matt Edmondson. Oh yes, this is a show all about helping you deliver e-commerce well. And to help us do just that, today we are chatting with a man all the way, almost from the other side of the world, it feels like, close to Vancouver. So maybe not as far away as we think. Jordan West, who is from the West, from Up Growth Commerce, about navigating the new tide, affiliate influencer marketing in the era of TikTok shops. Oh yeah, we're going to get into marketing. We're going to get into TikTok. And as Jordan said, we can talk about pretty much anything. And we probably will. So do stay tuned, grab your notebooks, grab your pens. Now, if you're new to the e-commerce podcast, let me extend a very warm welcome to you. Always great when new people join us. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button or follow us wherever you get your podcast from, because we just love talking about e-com. And I know it is going to be helpful for you and your e-commerce business, because I get so many people commenting and just connecting with me and saying, man, that was super, super helpful. So we know it's good stuff, so make sure you subscribe to it. If you're feeling a little bit daring, go to the website, ecommercepodcast.net, put in your name and email address, and we will send you an email every week with the notes and the links from the show straight to your inbox. Oh yes, nothing you got to do, it's just automatic. It's a beautiful thing. So why not give that a shout as well? Be great to see you. There's thousands of other people on that newsletter list. You won't be the first, but you will get some great stuff, no doubt about it. Now, let's take a brief moment to thank the show sponsor. Oh yes, e-commerce cohort enables us to bring you the e-commerce podcast. It's our monthly membership group. It's what keeps us going. If you haven't done so already, check it out, ecommercecohort.com. I'm in there. We've got workshops. We've got all kinds of stuff about e-com, and you even get to watch the podcast recording live if you're a member. Why not check it out? It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. Have a look, as they say. Now, let's talk about Jordan. Jordan West leaped into the marketing world in 22, transforming a Taco de Mer restaurant into a sales triumph through sheer ingenuity. I am Jordan, just to pre-warn you, my friend, I want to know what sheer ingenuity looks like. He and his wife then nurtured Little and Lively from a quaint home venture to a juggernaut among Canada's top baby brands, showcasing his flair for scaling e-commerce businesses. Off the clock, Jordan swapped business strategies for life-saving techniques as a paramedic, a man after my own heart. I don't know what we're going to be talking about. We got some commonalities, let me tell you, and loved helping people on their worst day. Jordan, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you. How are you doing?
Oh, it's so great to be on. I had a really hard time. I'm not gonna lie to you, for the last 5 minutes or whatever that was, not talking, just listening. I'm like, oh, what a great exercise. This is really beautiful right now. I'm not gonna chime in on any of this kind of stuff. And even some of the language you were using, I was like, oh man, okay, this is really nice. I really appreciate all of that. Let's see if I can actually deliver on what that intro exactly was. Everything in it was true, but
yeah.
I just want to make sure that people understand it's not quite as good as it sounds, or I'm not quite as good as it sounds. But I'm going to really try and deliver some good stuff today.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Now, let's deal with the paramedic thing first. The reason why that caught my attention, and just to let you know, I don't actually read these bios until we do the show, because I like to be surprised by them. And so it's always a thing that I do. I don't know why. I just like to be surprised by what's in the bio. And Sadaf puts a lot of time and energy into crafting these things, which is great. And so I didn't realize that you were a paramedic. Now, the reason why I find this interesting, apart from paramedics are awesome, is I too worked on the ambulances here in Liverpool, England. I too have seen a fair few things, come across people in their worst day. And actually, we had a lodger live with us Jenny lived with us, I don't know, 7-8 years. It was a long old time. And she was a beautiful young lady. She got married last year, I want to say, maybe the year before. I can't remember now. All blurs into it. Anyway, I walked her down the aisle. I did the whole father of the bride speech thing.
Beautiful.
And she's a paramedic. She married an advanced paramedic who drives the super fast cars around all kinds of cool stuff. I just love the whole paramedic thing, man. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for having some fun with that. And thank you for sticking through the boredom with that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting thinking about some of the confluence between being a paramedic and the things that I learned in that and business, right? Like, really, no matter what kind of meeting I go into or issue that I'm in, I'm like, it's not really scary. Like, what's the worst thing? I mean, I've told literally hundreds of people that their loved one is dead, and had to have that difficult conversation with them and had to navigate that, right? And so we're just talking about business. That's okay.
Yep.
Like we can do conversations like that, and it's just money, right? Like my mentor, he's South African, and he's got this some kind of South African phrase that basically just throws his hands up and is like, it's just money, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just had a really good friend of mine, a lawyer friend of mine, drop dead with an aneurysm, right?
Oh, wow.
That's life. This is business, and it's a lot of fun. And so I think it's really nice to still maintain that old perspective. It's been 4.5 years since I've done anything to do with being a paramedic, and I miss it a bit. So, I'm glad that you brought it back up. I was like, yeah, that's right. That was Jordan, 17.0, and we're now on Jordan 25 or whatever it is.
So whatever state we're in now, we don't really know. No, absolutely. It is fascinating. You're right. And when you contrast the two things, when you have to deal with people in their worst moments of life, I've never come across anything in business that's that bad. We've had some bad times, but in context, we're still here, and it's quite a sobering thought, isn't it? And it's always quite interesting to think about that. So tell me about what was it we said in the bio? I'm just going to pull it up here. So you tackled their restaurant sales triumph through sheer ingenuity. What was that all about?
Who writes these things? That's what I want to know.
So she's great. She's also Canadian, funnily enough.
Oh, wonderful. So yeah, let me tell you a little bit about that. So I was 22 years old, and I'm now 38. I don't know if, you guys are probably thinking like, oh, 38, you don't look like that. You don't look a day over 23. No, I was at the barber yesterday.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
He showed me the back of my head, and let me tell you, I said, sorry, is that skin that I'm seeing through there? Is that what I'm seeing? And he put his hand over top and he said, no, it looks just fine to me. So I know I'm getting a little bit older when that's starting to happen. So let me tell you about this. So I was 22 years old and I just wanted to get into business. I knew nothing about business. But I knew I wanted to get into business. Why? I don't know. I just wanted to. And I thought, oh, this is a wonderful way to do it. And so Taco Del Mar at the time was a chain. I think there was about 200 stores. And they were actually in a bankruptcy as an entire organization. Right. And so we knew that they were going to get bought out of it, but a lot of the stores were struggling. And I thought, so I was able to buy a store for about 35,000 Canadian. Right. And so I was like, well, I know the equipment is probably worth around that. So like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, the worst thing that can happen is 5 years of my life losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. And learning so much. And so I was not good at operations. I've never been good at operations. I'm sure you can tell I'm not an operations kind of guy. We lost a lot of money, but we ended up tripling the sales over that time. And so I was really, really proud of that. And I feel like we kind of maxed out the capacity. And the reason why I think that is because we were almost even with the Subway that was next door to us. And Subway was still kind of in its heyday at that time. And I knew what their sales were. I knew what ours were. And I thought, okay, I think we've maxed out what we can do here. And we still couldn't make money. And it was such a great experience. It's funny, people will say like, oh, 2+ exits or 2x exits or something. I never considered that an exit. I sold it for $25,000 at the end of it because I didn't want to renew the lease. Right? But you know what? What an incredible experience, right? In all of this, I always take these experiences and think like, what do I want to look back on in my life? Like, do I want to die with a big pile of cash? Why? I don't know. Like what I want is to experience things, right? And yes, in those moments it's hard, right? Like we're actually, I own a bunch of businesses now, and some of them are going through some really difficult times, and we're having to have some really hard conversations with banks and all these things. And it's funny, none of it keeps me up. It just doesn't. It's like, okay, well, none of it's going to kill me, right? Like I don't have debt to the mafia. So like, none of it's going to kill me. And And if anything, it's just a beautiful way to just continue to experience life. So
Yeah.
That's what I got to say about that.
That sounds fascinating. It's interesting because one of the strategic decisions we've made as a company in the non too distant past is we've decided that we are going to start investing in other e-com businesses, right? So we've been running, I don't know if I've mentioned this before on the podcast. It's probably the first time I have mentioned it, actually. But we've been running e-com businesses for 22 years now, I suppose. Jesus, long time. Goodness me, it's a long time.
Wow.
The
birth of e-com.
Yeah, something like that. And we've been doing it a while. We added up our sort of total worldwide sales. It was over $75 million. Our clients over $100 million. Well, this is pretty cool. You know, we've learned a thing or two on the way. And so I'm intrigued now to see whether investing in other companies and becoming part of another business, you know, having multiple businesses like that, is the sort of the next level. And I'm, like you say, it's just fun. The whole idea of it I find fascinating and fun, and finding partners that you can work with and just enjoying it, just seeing what happens and why not.
Yes. And I think that's that's a great question, right? Like, well, why not? Maybe it's going to be difficult. It probably will be. Just because something's difficult doesn't mean not to do it. And obviously, you know, you're not going to go and like, you know, bet $1 million on something that you're like, I don't know, let's just do it. But there is a point where you have to take risks, right? And it's interesting because I've been having a lot of lawyer and banker conversations recently. Yeah. And lawyers and bankers are not creative. They're not entrepreneurs, right? They don't know how. What they don't know how to do is creatively solve a problem, right? So true. What they know how to do is tell you what things happened and what things look like right now. Whereas entrepreneurs have this incredible way of being able to create the future. Like we're incredible as humans. We can somehow imagine something and then it can happen. Like it's magic. Do we not like realize how magical what we do is, especially as entrepreneurs, right? We're creating worlds, right? So that's really important to remember that like, what you're doing is really important in the world. Whether you're, you know, you might just think, oh, I'm just selling a widget or whatever it is. What you're doing is important. It matters.
Yeah. Totally agree. By the way, I'm loving your little logo behind you. Well, it's not little, is it really? But the clever way of doing the word up, like that, with the heart.
Yes.
Very clever.
Yes.
Yeah, nothing related to anything. Of course, if you're listening to the podcast and not watching it, you're like, Matt, what are you talking about? Just go to the website, Google Upgrowth Commerce, and you'll see what I mean. So tell me a little bit about Upgrowth Commerce. Tell me, you know, what you got, how you guys have sort of ended up where you are now.
Yeah, great question. Again, and thanks for having me on here. This is one of my favorite things in the world to do. So I'll tell you a bit about Upgrowth Commerce. Upgrowth Commerce actually started way back in the day. I think it was like 2014, 2015. I started drop shipping. So my very first store was drop shipping hoverboards. And so at that time, I don't know if you guys remember.
Kind of like hoverboards, you know, like kind of Back to the Future type thing.
Yeah, like those things where like you had to balance and
okay, I know what you mean.
Yeah, those like balance boards. We over here call them hoverboards. And so there was quite a demand for them. And I was like, okay, I think I can figure this out. So I still had my Taco Del Mar restaurant and I was trying to figure it all out. So I just started running some Google ads and I actually made a lot of money. In at that time, I was like, you know, things were very difficult. And I think I made an extra $20,000 or $30,000. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. It was all great until I sold something to somebody just down the street from me. And I was drop shipping these from China and they were having issues with it. And then other people started having issues with them. And I was like, you know what? Wow. I want to own my products. I don't want to sell somebody else's products. Yeah. I want to own. So like everything I do, I want to make sure that it's mine and that I can actually stand behind it. So I just ended up just shutting that down. It was called Hoverboard Authority. If anybody wants the URL, hoverboardauthority.com, I think I still own it. And so it was really fun. And during that time, my wife and I had our first child. We have 3 now. And she's 10, Daphne. And my wife was a fashion designer, but she wasn't really using it much. She was doing some graphic design for a nonprofit at the time. And so she started making, we were trying out cloth diapers. Yeah. And cloth diapers, worst decision ever. Well, I mean, every decision. I feel your pain, brother.
We made the same decision. We never, anyway, carry on.
It was only for the first little bit, but it really sparked what happened with our baby brand at Little and Lively, because we realized that there was a huge issue. We could not find leggings that would go over top of cloth diapers. They just wouldn't fit, and they would like sit halfway down. And so my wife was like, oh, this is an easy pattern to make. And so she just kind of tweaked the pattern. She got some from Carter's or something and just kind of tweaked it and was like, oh, I think that this will work. And then people saw them and were like, oh, well, can I get them? And then a wholesaler called us and was like, hey, can we get them? And we went to some craft markets and we kept selling out. And it's incredible because our baby leggings are still our number one seller. That was 2014 and we're in 2024.
Wow.
They're
Awesome.
still our number one seller, which is just crazy. And people come to us from all over the world for these leggings, which is funny because it's a very like, it's a product that you think would be all out there, but people haven't made this kind of version of it still in the baby space. And so from there, we found, we went on Etsy because we were pretty familiar with Etsy through some other like crafting kind of stuff that my wife liked to do. And then from Etsy, we started to look into different platforms. And at the time, it was not an obvious choice to go with Shopify. It just wasn't. It was like, we were like looking all over. Now, I wish that I had poured a bunch of that money into Shopify stock at that time. Yeah. That would have been, what a sweet story that would be right now.
Yeah, you and me both.
I
should have seen that one coming.
Totally. Well, and it's interesting because I never mean to be an early adopter. I never mean to. I just have friends that are early adopters that tell me about these things. And I'm like, the one thing I'm really good at, I love Clifton Strengths. And one of the strengths in Clifton Strengths is a maximizer strength. And it's really being able to see something and like, oh, I know what to do with that. Or that person's strength. And I know where to put them exactly. That's really the only strength I have. I can never see into the future, but I've got friends who can. So Shopify, we went on there and then we started running ads and people would see our ads and they'd be like, hey, can you do that for us? And at the time it was like, sure, like why don't I come show you how to do it? It's really easy. So I would show them how to do that and set up flows. And then, I found Klaviyo at the time or Klaviyo, whatever you guys call it. And, and we just kind of started to go from there. And I was just doing all this for free for people. And somebody was like, well, hey, can you run it for us? I was like, yeah, sure. So I hired a friend. And then from there, it just kind of ballooned and it just started to take off. And so I realized I love the agency game. I love it more than the brand game. I'm not, because I'm not a good operator,
Yeah.
And so that's where Upgrowth Commerce came from. And it really just came out of the need of, number one, for my wife and I not to work together every day, because that doesn't work, in my opinion.
Yeah, the quickest way to get a divorce is work with your wife in a lot of ways, isn't it? I mean, hats off to people that can do it successfully, but I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, to me, it's not the kind of life I want to live in that sort of way. And also, we're both visionaries, right? So when you bring two visionaries into a group, and this is why I love the entrepreneurial operating system, right? Like having that language where you're like, oh, actually, I'm a visionary, you're a visionary, but we both try and make each other the other person's integrator. Like, like we both want to have that. Yeah, and so I had this beautiful vision for the agency of what I wanted to create. And through some hiccups and all of that kind of stuff, we kind of are where we are now at the agency. And I also have run a podcast for years with the agency called Secrets to Scaling Your E-commerce Brand, where I've brought on lots of just amazing brands over the years and heard about them. And we're in such an interesting cycle right now in e-com, right? Like I hear about, I would say, a brand a day going bankrupt right now.
Yeah, it's quite a common thing at the moment.
It's really, really, really difficult right now. And so what we're trying to do is figure out, like, where do agencies sit in all of this, right? And for anyone who can see my sign back here, you can see A and sucks. But really, what my big thing that I'm talking about is that agencies suck. And it's not because I think that agencies actually do. I think that inherently there is a mismatched, there's mismatched incentives for agencies versus brands. And what I'm really trying to do, and I do a lot of consulting with agencies, and it's kind of like, I think about it almost like the psychological torment where I'm like, agencies suck. Hey, come consult with me, so I can tell you how not to suck, but really at the end of the day, I think that there's misaligned incentives in a lot of ways. Right. And that's what I'm trying to solve with Upgrowth. And then also in the greater, scheme of where agencies sit exactly specifically with direct consumer brands.
Well, it's interesting listening to you talk, because I love the fact that your agency was born out of your experience in e-com, right? So I know a lot of agency owners that have never run an e-commerce business, but come to people like me and say, I can make your e-commerce business better, right? And part of me gets it. Part of me is like, well, you're a specialist in this area. I get that. But I love the fact that actually what you do is born out of your experience in e-com, right? In terms of running your store. And that's what, I mean, we do coaching as a result of, what we do in e-com. It comes out of that experience. I'm not trying to convince people or clients to do stuff we've not done and tested on ourselves. I think there's kind of like an integrity to that. And I love that about your story, and what you're doing. When you say that agencies are, they've got misaligned sort of targets or misaligned, what was the exact phrase you used?
Incentives.
Incentives, that's the word, sorry. The misaligned incentives, what do you mean by that?
So I want to give you an example here. So to actually offer the kind of service that we need to offer for a brand in creative and media buying and strategy and all of these things, we need to charge to break even about $10,000 a month to a brand, right? So to do that though, right? So we need to start with us first in mind, right? When we're thinking about offering this kind of service, that right away gets you misaligned, right?
Yeah.
Immediately we're misaligned because I'm only thinking about what I need, right? And I'm a huge win-win guy. Not in the sort of like plithy kind of like, I don't know, like maybe win-win, like, oh, let's try and figure it out. No, really, I need to figure out like, well, what's the win on our side? Because we have to figure out what the win on our side is. So when you start there of what do I need first, I don't actually think that works. I think that first figuring out, well, what does an e-com brand need, right? What can they afford right now? We're in this place right now, this e-com winter or whatever we're calling it, where brands cannot afford a $10,000 minimum retainer. It's not going to work. What kind of return do you have to get on a $10,000 retainer to make it worthwhile?
Yeah.
A lot of money. Right? Like we need to 10x our return alone, let alone if we're spending, on ads and whatever else it is.
Yeah.
We need to have a massive return because I understand. And I think that's the beautiful thing about running this agency is that I understand and can empathize with business owners and e-com store owners being like, the margins they're not what everybody thinks when you take shipping and returns and all of this kind of stuff into it. Like, I think about one of our brands. I have a $20,000 a month lease. There's a lot of costs that go into it that people don't realize. And so I think that right away you start with misaligned incentives. And so what we're really trying to figure out is, well, how do we have the best kind of incentive that actually aligns with what the brand wants to do? Also, while realizing a lot of things that agencies do are completely commoditized. Media buying, in my opinion, is a commodity on Google, Facebook, on TikTok, all those things. It's a commodity. Does it mean that it's not important? Oh, it's incredibly important, but it's a commodity. It's not some kind of special skill that you necessarily can't get over, a week. You can know how to media buy, but it's really important that you actually trust who does that. Trust is not a commodity, right?
Yeah.
That is one of those things that is absolutely not a commodity. And so even strategy, I mean, with ChatGPT, like, let's be honest, it gets pretty good when it comes to strategizing and coming up with different ideas and all of that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about there's misaligned incentives. That I think what happens is an agency figures out what they need to charge, and then they create a bunch of things to try to justify that price.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's very good. So how do you do it then? Do you do it? How do you do it differently?
Yeah. So one of the big things, and this is something huge that we're working on right now, of changing everything, because I've been seeing this coming, and I've been seeing this in the agency space for a while. And so really what we're trying to do is win when brands win. And so what that means is really base everything on performance. And so have very low retainers that are really performance based. Now, in the past with, like, let's say Meta ads, it was really difficult to do that, especially when attribution was all over the place. How do you do that when it comes to that? Well, in my opinion, Meta ad buying is a commodity. And so we charge a flat rate for it, a flat lower fee rate.
Yeah.
That is like way better than the previous service that we created, right?
Yeah.
So the previous service that we created was all about meeting and strategy and all of these things. Really, at the end of the day, you need to figure out what ad is going to actually drive traffic. And generally it's 1 to 5 ads that are going to drive all of your traffic that are then going to do the rest on your business, right? And so what I'm always looking for is, what is that next thing that is going to actually help brands? Media buying is something that has to happen. You have to be buying media, and you have to be getting new eyeballs on your brand all the time. I'm not saying do not get rid of your ad spend. Absolutely not. But really think about what exactly it's doing for you and the reason why you are spending that kind of money, and enter TikTok shops, right? This whole new world of what things look like. I don't know if you want to get into that yet, but
let's go there.
Yeah. So what I saw coming and let's shift over into the influencer landscape. So we've worked with influencers for years at our brands. So we own multiple brands, by the way. We'll see in the next 6 months how many we own. We're divesting quite heavily right now on that side, just because of just a lot of different factors. For me, I've gone all in at the agency. I have CEOs that are running everything else, or general managers, or whatever that is. Personally, this is what I want to do. We tripled our agency last year, which is great. The only reason we did that is because we actually, tripled the amount of brands that we're helping. And so we want to continue to do that. I love what I do here. And so I really want to focus on this. And so that's why we're divesting quite a bit of stuff. But all of that to say, what I saw coming in the influencer space was that there was a bubble, right? There's always bubbles, and you can generally see bubbles afterwards. I think I've seen this bubble while it's happening in the influencer space. The reason why is I also, and I don't know if you're in this space too, I also am an influencer in certain ways. I get paid by software companies often to talk about them. And everything that I do is based on trust. And so I will only work with ones that I actually believe in. I've tried, I use, but they don't necessarily always pay me for performance. They'll just pay a flat rate. And sometimes I think, you're paying me a lot of money just to talk about you, right?
Yeah.
Is this actually a win-win? And so when you think win-win, you realize, oh, are they actually getting everything out of this that they could be? And so I love the performance model, because you only get paid when you actually perform. And so I've seen this with influencers. Now let's get into direct to consumer, because I think this is where it really hits, is the amount of times, and I don't know about you, maybe you're a lot more wise than me, but the amount of times that I've paid $1,000 for an influencer to post and it's done nothing.
Yeah.
And we maybe get a piece of content, it's innumerable, right? Like the amount of times you're like, oh, this one's going to hit. And so I saw this in the space and I was like, this cannot last. Brands are not going to be able to do this. And thus hits the e-com winter, where these brands just don't have money to do that anymore. And so, so it started, this performance influencer model started to come around, and I started to connect with the guys over at Social Snowball and started to look into, what exactly does this look like? And then bing, TikTok shops happen. Yeah. And when it first happened, people started to talk about it. And I was like, well, what's the big deal? It's like Facebook shops or Instagram shops. Like, who cares? What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that it's disrupting everything in the influencer world. That is the big deal, because it's all based on performance. The influencers don't get paid unless they perform. Yeah. Like, that's it. That's the only possible way that they get paid. So when I talk about aligning incentives, TikTok shops aligns the incentives absolutely perfectly. There is no brand sub $20 million right now that can afford to just pay for posts without it actually doing something. We cannot do that right now. It's not going to happen. And so now there's this incredible thing, and I'll get into this. I'd love to know. I feel like I've just talked. I don't know if you have any. I'm going to just stop talking for a sec.
No, so I'm sucked in. I'm kind of listening to you talk about influencers, and I totally agree with you. I think this idea of misaligned incentives, whether with agency, whether with influencers, I see it all the time. I do see it all the time. I was talking earlier about investing in new companies. You see that all the time as well. People come to you and think, well, I've been trading for 5 years, therefore my company's worth $1 million, because everybody wants to make $1 million and then clear out, right? And you're just like, no. I don't know how to tell you this, but no, not at any kind of level. Yeah. And so it's interesting listening to you talk about that. And what I'm picking up, Jordan, is actually in your voice a real excitement for TikTok shops and influencers? It seems like you've stumbled across into something there which has really sort of lit a spark for you.
Absolutely. Number one, at the agency, what brand wants to come and talk to us about ads? There are 7 trillion people who do that, right?
Yeah.
I love anything that's blue ocean. I love,
Mm-hmm.
right? Anything that's new and even like our new pricing model for ads is the most blue ocean thing I can think of. All these agencies have to charge this huge amount. And what we figured out was, okay, how do we, and I love Alex Hormozy. I know, he's the big, ripped kind of guy, and, he's probably the most brilliant business person out there right now. And in $100 million offers, he's talking about how do you give the most possible value, right, for the lowest price, especially when you're in a commodity or you're in a red ocean market. That's how you create blue oceans, right? Is figuring that out. And so we've reinvented all of that. We're like, what do people actually want? How can we use automation in certain ways? How can we use all of these different tools that we have to create a better experience, right? So let's go back to TikTok shops, because I'm obsessed with it right now. Now, am I obsessed with TikTok shops in general? Yes, but only because it's the first player in North America when it comes to this, right? I was chatting with a friend the other day who's got a friend of a friend, who reports to the C-suite at Meta. And they are going to be rolling out a pixel for pixel copy of the TikTok shop experience in Q3.
Wow.
And that they're going to absolutely crush, right?
Yeah.
So I want to be at the forefront of all this, right? Selfishly, it's funny, I'm going to some events, and I was going to do a live podcast at one of them. And I said, dude, put me on the main stage to talk about TikTok shops, because that's what people want to talk about. That's what people want to hear about, because everything's changing. It's not the same as it used to be.
Yeah.
So let me walk through why it's the most revolutionary thing to come to e-com since Amazon. I really, truly believe this. And I'm not just saying this because I'm hyped on it or anything like that. I mean, I am hyped on it, but I actually believe that is the most revolutionary thing since Amazon. Let me tell you why. So first of all, it's pay to play, right? It's all performance. That number one is incredible. One of my core values, and a core value actually we have at Upgrowth Commerce, is we give transparency and visibility. TikTok has done that. They have done that in the back end. So when you go into Seller Central or Seller Center, in the back end, you can actually see to the dollar amount how much an influencer is driven for brands. So you better believe that I'm going to go to the ones that have already started to drive revenue for brands, right? In what world that isn't TikTok would they open that kind of data up? And now Meta has to. They're going to have to when they run this, right? So it's not just that. Let me walk through why I think it's the opposite funnel of what we used to do. So this is what I'm proposing at Upgrowth. And I will tell you, Matt, the amount of conversations that I am having right now with brands and the amount of people, we cannot keep up right now with the amount of conversations we're having at Upgrowth about TikTok shops, because this is what I think people are starting to realize, oh my gosh, this is why it's so incredible. I put a webinar on yesterday. I had 160 people attend. What? Since when has that ever happened on a webinar? Since 2013. People are hungry and they're realizing, oh my gosh, this is the new way. So let me tell you the new way. So it flips it completely on its head. So you start with TikTok shops. So we do a ton of outreach to influencers. We're really not getting super picky. We're just making sure that these influencers have driven some revenue and they're talking to our target demo. That's it.
Yeah.
And so interestingly, on the agency side, and I hope people understand this, it is a sales play. And so we did not give up this service to our operations team at the agency. This is a sales exercise, what we're doing, because you're trying to sell to the influencer. It's not just a matter of hey, do you want to do this product? Or do you want to rep this product? No. That's not it at all. It's hey, and so we've got all sorts of great initial messaging templates that we've created, where it's hey, Jenny, we think that you'd be awesome. This Lisa over here drove 600 sales for us the other day with this particular product. I think if you created something like this, you could probably do something similar. Do you want to work with us? By the way, we want to get usage rights for everything up front. Are you comfortable with that? On TikTok. So on Instagram, what would people say? Oh yeah, for $1,000, I'll give you usage rights. On TikTok, oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, whatever. I'd love to be a part of whatever you're doing. This is the difference, right?
Yeah, yeah,
They understand the value gap, right? Instagram influencers, there is no value gap. It's probably actually an opposite value gap right now.
Do you
Versus
think
on
that's
TikTok,
because? Do you think that's because it's a generational thing that I was stereotyping a little bit. Instagram's millennials, TikTok is Gen Z or Gen Z, right? And is it
yeah,
is it a generational mindset shift? Do you think?
I don't know. I'm a millennial, and I don't I don't know. I don't think I think like most millennials. So I feel much more comfortable in the baby boomer sort of phase, you know. I like the hard work. Like, no, you wait. Like, guys, I wake up at between 3:30 and 5 every single morning to work because I love working, and I love it's. Sorry, I don't love working. I love building, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I don't know if that's, but what I think it is the proliferation of people trying to make money to help people make money as influencers. And so they tell them, know your worth, know how much you can charge. And it's like, know your worth. It's zero. Your worth is zero when it comes to this. Barely even, I don't even know if I want to give you a product. That's what your actual value to the brand is. And I know that's harsh. Like, don't use that one as a clip here, you know. Know your worth. Your worth is zero.
Self-esteem 101 with Jordan West.
But really, your worth is whatever you can generate in revenue for a brand. Brands do not need right now more awareness. They need sales. That's what brands need in 2024. So I think that's really important to note. And that's what TikTok Shops has done, right? Is like said, well, hey, you're going to make money as a percentage of what you drive. So what ends up happening is people are actually getting incredibly creative. And I think that some people are really scared. They're like, oh no, it's ruining TikTok, right? I mean, for me, I think TikTok was ruined when it was created. It's this mythical beast that somehow keeps you on there for hours at a time and has somehow become the biggest search engine in North America now. And it's I mean, let's not get into all of that, but how do you leverage these people that are there anyway, right? Like they're going to be on TikTok no matter what. But sorry, let's go back to people thought or think that what's happening is like, oh, it's just like a bunch of like terrible shopping ads that are showing up all the time in my feed. Yes, but people are going to get better. I saw this great ad the other day for a product called Lemmy. It's like a sleep gummy, and it wasn't even an ad. It was just a post. It had 2.3 million likes on it. I don't even know how many plays it had on it. And it was the most brilliant non-ad ad I have seen in my life. And creators are going to get better, right? They're going to get better. They're going to create content that's like, I watched that like 3 or 4 times, and I was like, this is brilliant. And then I thought, been having a bit of an issue sleeping recently. I should think about that one. It was a hilarious ad, but maybe I'll just try it out. I have not purchased it yet. I actually think I couldn't get it in Canada. I think that was the issue, which is very common, by the way, everyone. Not being able to get things in our communist society we have here. Just kidding. I love Canada. Justin, if you're listening to this, don't blacklist me or anything.
No, come on to this podcast because I've got some questions for you, Justin. I really have.
Yeah, for Trudeau, yeah. I think his approval rating right now is 20%.
Is it that high? Okay.
So anyway, I know this isn't a political
Johnson.
podcast. Yeah. At least he was funny, you know? Like,
That's true. Yeah. He did give you a few laughs along the way.
Yeah. So this is the way. Now, let me tell you how to leverage it. Because some people are like, well, what if I don't get any sales on it? I'm like, it doesn't matter because we're getting usage rights, right? So let's just say, like, you're obviously going to get sales on TikTok Shop, right? But even if you don't get a mass amount of sales, you start to know what drives traffic, right? And so now you don't have to guess on your ad creative because you already know what works, right? You know what drove traffic on TikTok Shop is going to drive traffic on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. All of these things and these hooks and these triggers are what will drive traffic in other places. And so the virtuous cycle that we have is we use this tool called Refunnel. There's another one called Archive that essentially just gathers all of this so that we can download all of it. We don't need to worry about any of the usage rights because we've already got usage rights. We don't work with anyone that we don't get usage rights for. We don't even send product out to them. Right. So now we know So our team goes into Refunnel, downloads these. We then first take them and repurpose them on the brand's TikTok page, right? So we'll take it, we'll add different music, we'll maybe add a different hook, we'll add like, there's a fun little one that you can do where you add like some typing at the beginning, and that really actually hooks people. So like a black screen with some white typing or white and black. Usually I think black and white is actually the one that works a little bit better. So we'll just repurpose these videos and they'll go viral again. Right? Yeah. They'll go viral again because there's some little tweak, but it's the messaging that works. And then we'll send them to TikTok Shop that way. Then we'll take it and we'll start to use these ads on all the different platforms to start to drive traffic for them to their direct to consumer site, or maybe to their Amazon page, whatever their business objective is at the time. And it's this beautiful way that, for us at the agency, we figured out, oh my gosh, we've aligned our incentives completely. And I also tell people, like, we've got some brands that are going to do, $300,000 or $400,000 a month, and we're doing a performance deal. And I'm like, don't worry, let's redo the contract. We don't want you paying us 50 grand a month because we're on a performance deal, right? Like that's not, I also don't think that that's the greatest thing in the world, because I do understand at the end of the day, then they look at that and they're like, well, I could hire 8 people to do that, right? So we're constantly trying to figure out what is that mix where we want to be, and again, transparency and visibility is so important for us. And so that's what's working right now on TikTok Shops, and that's why I think that it's something that, and I don't even think people realize how much it's going to change behavior, right? Behavior will be changed on all of these. There's like millions of influencers that don't realize that they're being disrupted right now, that they no longer have a job. They'll realize in about 6 months or a year when this all happens on Instagram, right? They'll realize and like, oh, I have to change, right? And we always have to change, right? But this was a bubble, and the bubble is over.
Yeah, that's super cool. What kind of things do you think are working well in TikTok Shops? What kind of products do you see working well on there? Or is it a case of like you sell a couch, you can sell it on TikTok Shop? Or are there specific things that we should think about?
That's a really good question. So I would say that higher AOV products probably are not going to work nearly as well. Now we have some brands that we work with. We have a trampoline brand that we work with, a $3,000 AOV. So, and we're testing on TikTok Shops right now. We have not had great success so far. Brands in the $50 to $100 AOV range, they work incredibly well. It has to be something novel. I actually talked to the cool apparel brand yesterday, and they have this product, and they're not working with us yet, but we're in the midst of potentially working with them. And they have this really cool product that is like heat activated. So you put it on, like say you put your hand on the chest, and now you see this handprint. Really cool, novel kind of stuff like that works.
Oh, you mean
really
like
well.
the global hypercolor t-shirts from yesteryear? Do you remember those?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. This is a different brand that's more like in the kind of streetwear sort of world, but really, really cool kind of stuff like that works incredibly well. Really anything that you can tell a story about, right? As long as you can tell a story around the brand and it's not a commodity brands, I mean, it's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
You have to need to be able to tell a story and get someone to do that. A quick story I want to tell you. I had a podcast guest on Secrets of Scaling Your E-commerce Brand the other day, and they were in an airport, the bridge in between getting onto the plane, and everyone had stopped. I guess, people were putting their luggage up, and he looked, and there was like a 20 to 25-year-old girl in front of him, and he looked at her phone and she was scrolling TikTok. Suddenly she stopped, and she saw this TikTok Shop post, went in and purchased it in 30 seconds. That is the power. That is the power. And that will happen on Instagram. And then 3 billion people will be exposed to this new world, right? Yeah. And so figuring this out now, I think, is really important. And this is why 160 people would show up for a business webinar, because there's a new world that's happening right now. And I'm so happy to be, and this is why I'm waking up at 5 a.m. or 3:30 every morning, because I'm so pumped about what this new world looks like. But it takes a lot of work to get there, right? And I hope it's helpful for people. I really do. And I'm going to continue to talk about it more and more and more. It's funny, a millennial guy who has no idea what to do on TikTok, and I'm talking about this stuff, but I just see the opportunity. And don't worry, guys, I've hired a 20-year-old absolute gunner right now who's taking care of all of the strategy for me and doing all of the stuff in the background. So don't worry about that.
Fantastic. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. Jordan, listen, I'm aware of time, and I'm aware that I'm getting sucked into this very deep conversation. I've taken 2 pages of notes already. So, we've got a lot of notes, which is good. And so if people want to reach you, if they want to connect with you, if they want to find out more about the agency, the podcast, maybe not at 3:30 in the morning, but if they want to do that, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So, podcast is Secrets to Scaling Your E-commerce Brand. I'm talking a lot about this over there. The agency is upgrowthcommerce.com. If you just go there and put a contact form in. Our website, guys, it's classic agency website. Like, oh yeah, don't look at it for 3 or 4 years because we're just busy working on everything else. So
like the
just a horrible
house,
representation of yeah. And then I'm really active on LinkedIn and Twitter all the time. So if you just search Jordan West on there, Jordan West Marketer or something like that, you will find me. I am constantly trying to divine out what I am learning and try to communicate it in a succinct sort of way that people can just take and learn. My very favorite thing is when people are bookmarking and sharing stuff around. That is all I want is to be useful in this world. So if you guys want to follow me over there, that would be great. And thank you so much for having me on.
Oh no, it's been an absolute treat, man. I've really enjoyed it. It's interesting. It's very timely for us because we're playing around with TikTok shops at the moment, and so listening to you talk, I'm kind of like, there's a question that you caused me to think about. I've not noted it down. I'm going to go talk to Jen about that tomorrow. So it's been great having you on. So super stoked, man, to finally get you on the show. Thanks for being so great in terms of value, and really appreciate it, man. Genuinely, it's great.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, there you go. What another fantastic conversation. Huge thanks again to Jordan for joining me today. Also, a big shout out to today's show sponsor, the e-commerce cohort. Remember to check them out at ecommercecohort.com, and I will see you in there. Also, be sure to follow the e-commerce podcast wherever you get your podcast from, because we've got yet more great conversations lined up, and I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, let me be the first. You are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you've got to bear. Jordan's got to bear it. I've got to bear it. You've got to bear it as well. Now, the e-commerce podcast is produced by PodJunction. You can find our entire archive of episodes on your favorite podcast app. The team that makes this show possible is the beautiful and talented Sadaf Bainon and Tanya Hutzlak. Our theme music was written by Josh Edmondson. And as I mentioned, if you would like to read the transcript or show notes, head to the website, ecommercepodcast.net, where, like I said, you can sign up to the newsletter if you haven't done so already. So that's it from me. That's it from Jordan. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic time, fantastic week, wherever you are in the world. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.